It's expected that anytime between now and next week, the Parliament will convene and endorse the Prime Minister's proposal for reshuffling of the government. And of course, the Prime Minister is also expected to defend the plan of his government based on the motion to endorse the remarks made by the President, and that will soon be followed by the reshuffling of the government. But like I said, I cannot give you specific date, but between now and next week, at the very least, you would expect that to happen. Well, with regard to the internet, it's still my contention that the internet is working, although there has been ban on mobile data services. And of course, when the government assesses the situation and feels that mobile data services could go ahead without threatening the implementation of the state of emergency, then it will immediately switch it on. It will depend exclusively on the assessment of the government. With regard to the gains made after the implementation of the state of emergency, what we can say is that we have been able to arrest the rate with which destruction was being visited upon our people. The violence has been controlled, and we have created a situation where people are now in a position to go about their normal lives without fear of being attacked. Many investments, and of course many plants and factories are back in business, and security and stability has been restored in many parts of the country, but it's still a work in progress because a lot remains to be done in terms of ensuring that the kind of stability, that kind of normalcy that is now returning is in fact sustained for as long as it is necessary. But obviously it has created an opportunity for the people to distinguish between the wheat and the chaff, as it were, and what we have is now a more or less stable situation returning. Yes, arrests have been made. People who were involved in killings, who were involved in destruction of property, suspects who have been suspected of committing all sorts of crimes have been handing themselves over, and in many cases the security forces under the command post have also been stepping at their efforts to make sure that individuals who've been responsible for the killings or the destruction of property are duly accounted for. And as the state of emergency clearly points out, we'll definitely have rehabilitation programs. In many cases, those people who have handed themselves over within the prescribed time duration will benefit from the kind of amnesty that was given them. We could roughly say that the number of people who have been arrested as a result of their involvement in the destruction of properties has been very significant, and this will continue. The rehabilitation, sometimes it could take a week, could take 2 weeks. There are also people who will have to have their days in court, based on, of course, depending on the gravity of the crimes they have been involved in. Of course, illegal weapons have also been retrieved from many parts of the country. this is one area in which the command post has been very successful, I would say. But in light of the fact that there are thousands of illegal weapons in many parts of the country, I know this is going to be a very tall order, but the government and the security command post will continue to take measures to make sure that these illegal weapons are retrieved, and no one who is interested in violence will lay their hands on. With regard to Somalia, I think it would be an explanation of sorts is in order. In Somalia, our presence in Somalia is of two kinds. The first is under AMISOM. We have a few thousand troops under AMISOM who have their own sectors. But at the same time, we have also additional couple thousand troops who've been helping AMISOM forces and supporting the federal government's forces, and they have been actively involved in fighting Al-Shabaab. But as we have been saying time and again, while the AMISOM forces our forces under AMISOM will continue to carry out their missions in Somalia until their mandate expires, or as long as their mandate lasts. The troops that we have sent to Somalia on our own do not necessarily have to stay there as long as AMISOM does. So the recent withdrawal of our forces from Halgan was part of our decision to move that contingent, which is not part of AMISOM, back to not necessarily to Ethiopia, but it will depend on the next decision by the government. But the assumption all along was that the international community will continue to support the Somalia National Army in taking over places that have been liberated by our forces. But for our forces to remain, those that are not under AMISOM, to remain there indefinitely would be the height of irresponsibility as far as we're concerned. But when we evacuate those areas, we do it as responsibly as possible, and we always try to make sure the Somali National Army is assisted in any way possible to fill the vacuum. But while our forces under AMISOM, like I said, will continue to serve out their missions as long as the mandate lasts, the forces that we've sent there as part of our mission to assist AMISOM, which are not under AMISOM, which are not unfortunately being helped in their efforts to assist the Somali National Army by the international community, cannot remain there indefinitely. So we have been making very conscious and responsible decisions to evacuate our forces from many parts of Somalia. Like I said, this has nothing to do with the forces that are serving under AMISOM, because ultimately the international community and whoever is supporting the Somali National Army will have to step up to the plate and take up the slack from us. I will reiterate this again. It has nothing to do with the state of emergency, because we have sufficient numerical strength as far as troops are concerned to implement the state of emergency, because the state of emergency is not a wholly military affair. What we are doing in this country is to mobilize the people against violence, and of course, in trying to achieve that, the military will have a role to play. Federal police will have a role to play. We haven't faced a challenge enormous enough for us to shift our policies in Somalia, because this contingent was there to assist AMISOM in the first place. Otherwise, it was not part of. I mean, we are the ones who are footing the bill. We are the ones who are paying all the expenses. So it will have, it will obviously have some economic burden on and logistical challenge on our troops. So we have to distinguish. But our forces under AMISOM are discharging their responsibility. Even our forces who are not under AMISOM are not abandoning Somalia altogether. What we are saying is there are certain areas where the rest of our partners should take up where we leave off.
What is the size? What is the size of this contingent? And also, has the Ethiopian government requested for the size for AMISOM to be expanded size-wise?
Well, the Ethiopian government doesn't have to request for the size of the AMISOM to expand. I know discussions have been in the works with regard to rehatting our forces, but people have all kinds of issues. But it's not for us to ask or to request the AMISOM, because ultimately the decision is going to be AU and the UN Security Council as far as footing the bill is concerned. So what we say is we sent our forces. I think with regard to the numbers, I don't think it would be helpful to give you specific numbers, but a couple thousand would be a rough idea.
The Somali authorities say that they didn't know about your pullout, and then you're saying it's irresponsible for you to stay longer down.
The Somalis know that we were evacuating. Well, I know Al-Shabaab is also part of Somalia. If Al-Shabaab is complaining that they didn't know we're evacuating,
well, if the Somalis knew, they didn't have much time. They may have had maybe a few days' notice, but they're telling us that they didn't know more than a few days in advance.
Well, like I said, our forces are not, they know our forces are not going to be there indefinitely. Those who are under AMISOM are there serving their mission superbly. And our forces who now evacuated only Halgan and another village, they are still within Somalia. So that part was to be taken care of by both the Somali National Army, but whenever we evacuate, we do so in a very responsible manner. But sometimes if our Somali brothers, for example, we're hoping that we will stay there forever, and then obviously we must have failed in communicating our intentions to them. But I don't think that was a problem.
What the effects of this state of emergency on the government?
Well, on the one hand, investment activities that have been discouraged as a result of violence will now move back in, and I think there will be improvement in that regard. But I cannot rule out anything. But this will be assessed in due course. Otherwise, I cannot say it doesn't have an impact, positive or negative. But we'll have to assess it in due course. So there will be more, not less people getting employment opportunities, because unemployed youth is a combustible material. So we know we have to make sure the youth have full access to not just education and other social amenities, but also work opportunities. And the government will redouble its efforts to create employment opportunities. That will require huge public works programs, but this is being worked out. But the most important lesson is that simply because you have offered certain amenities, no matter how big they are, in relation to the size of the country, you cannot take the people for granted. That's the most important lesson. I know of no funds being ready to do that, but one thing I can tell you is they will be assisted by making sure the kinds of challenges they are facing will not be there any longer.
Okay, and then another question I had is, will there be extra personnel or resources made available because of the large number of new detainees and arrested people that are there, and to deal with all of them, and will all of them have access to lawyers or public prosecution? How does that look?
I don't see any need for extra lawyers, extra prosecutors, or whatever. In many cases, these are going to be rehabilitation centers. Rehabilitation. You teach them constitutions. Probably this is the only government in the world that metes out punishment in the form of constitution classes. So I mean, some fitness exercise maybe. Mostly, it's only the most dangerous criminals will have to face the consequences really seriously. Otherwise, it's going to be rehabilitation programs in 3 weeks, a month. You teach them constitutions. You teach them some values and, well, some ABCs of basic decency, if you will. Otherwise, why would we be in a shopping spree for, in a recruiting spree for prosecutors? So it's mostly rehabilitation programs for many cases, but the exceptionally grave crimes that have been committed will have to be accounted for. That's for sure. Well, it's been a time-honored tradition. The other end of the Nile to send people who they believe will destabilize Ethiopia. But we are hoping that with President Sisi's positive engagement, constructive engagement, this will change. But we can only hope that this will change, but we'll never let our guards down, and we'll be taking appropriate measures when and if such an incident happens. But as for now, I cannot give you any clear answer, because we don't have any official information with regard to the crusade, if you will, to enlist the support of African leaders against the Renaissance Dam. I think he's entitled to his diplomatic moves. I'm not aware of such moves, but if that happens, and then he's entitled, because we know our African brothers have solidly supported our decision to build the Renaissance Dam, and more importantly, it was our people who rallied behind this project, and it is the support of our people first and foremost, and of course our African brothers and sisters that will carry the day. So we hope and expect our African brothers will not be swayed by any such move, if indeed that move is there. But my understanding is that we have had arrangements with the Egyptians and Sudanese to work out whatever differences we have with regard to the specifics of the Renaissance Dam, and the technical committee, the companies which are supposed to conduct the study have already been selected, and the agreement has already been signed. And if the Egyptians, our Egyptian brothers, decide to make a backdoor move to sabotage the Renaissance Dam, I hope that is not the case. But if it is the case, I don't think that will have much of an impact, because we know our African brothers are fully behind our construction, our building of the Renaissance Dam, and more importantly, our people are fully behind it, and we're determined to carry our mission through. One question I forgot. Aaron's question: which ministries? I mean, we are talking about reshuffling of a cabinet. It's not about targeting this ministry or that ministry. So you shouldn't be surprised if this is going to be my swan song as well. So whatever is deemed necessary to address the political, economic, whatever challenge we are facing will be subject of review. And it's not for me to determine which ministries, because ultimately it's the Prime Minister who will come up with the list. But it is the reshuffling of a cabinet, not a measure targeting one ministry or another. One of the rationales for the state of emergency being the diplomats' involvement in supporting the violence. Well, I cannot rule out the possibility of a diplomat supporting the violence, but that was not the rationale for declaring a state of emergency. The state of emergency was declared because we had violence that was by nature extraordinary, in the sense that ordinary measures of law enforcement were not able, were found wanting. So we have declared a state of emergency because that will enable the command post to take extraordinary measures to address this extraordinary challenge. To the extent that there was a role played by some diplomats, that will also be properly addressed, but I know of no explanation given by the government with regard to involvement of diplomats being one of the rationales for the declaration of state of emergency. But having said that, in the interest of safety of diplomats, we still expect diplomats to notify the authorities, of course through the foreign ministry, that they are intending to travel beyond 40 kilometers from Addis. So it's not about getting approval or not. It is more about notifying that they are intending to travel outside Addis. So the security forces will be particularly prepared to extend whatever support is necessary to ensure their safety and security. That's the whole idea. I have to be honest. I don't have the figures, but it's quite substantial. Al-Shabaab is not taking strongholds. Al-Shabaab could move in to areas where the Somali National Army wasn't able to move in. Because in the past, Al-Shabaab was roaming south-central Somalia because the Somali National Army wasn't there. So what our forces did achieve is create a situation where the Somali National Army will have the opportunity to take up the slack from us. So the international community has also a responsibility, either to train or to support the Somali National Army in whatever way they promised. And if that promise they didn't make good on that promise, and Somali National Army fails to discharge their responsibilities. And of course, as they say, nature and Al-Shabaab abhor vacuum, so they just move in those areas. But we'll always make sure Al-Shabaab doesn't pose a threat, significant threat. But like I said, it is also a responsible thing for us to expect both the Somali National Army and the international community to take up part of the responsibility. The state of emergency is only a short-term solution to address law enforcement issues. But the real solution, sustainable one, is a political one. The government intends to reshuffling the government is one of the agendas the government had put in place. But that's not enough, and we have to continue to have dialogue with stakeholders who are in the business of articulating the interest of the public. Could be political parties, there could be civil society groups, but whatever reforms the president has indicated during his speech will have to be implemented in order to consolidate the gains we have achieved over the years and to address the challenge that we've been facing. And of course, we have to bring our people on board on all these issues, dialogue, consultations, and whatever. So it's only through the engagement, continued engagement of the public in the all aspects of political life that we believe sustainable solutions could be achieved. Otherwise, law enforcement issues are only temporal in the sense that they cannot come up with, they cannot bring about lasting solutions to the political, economic, and social challenges that we continue to face. But am I worried that the diaspora will continue to accuse us of this and that? I don't think that's the source of my concern. I know the rejectionist elements within the diaspora will continue to try to sabotage whatever success they think will achieve as a result of, for example, the state of emergency. They'll be using every means at their disposal, and of course they are now making all sorts of frantic efforts to bring so many disparate elements together in their effort to dismember this country. But the most important issue for us is, as long as people are inoculated against such rejectionist agenda, people are inoculated through constructive engagement against such political as well as religious extremism or any extremism in whatever form it might appear, I think we'll find sustainable solution to our problems. And
but presumably it's not just inoculation. Presumably it's about showing how do you show legitimacy?
Oh yeah, I mean, so about, I mean,
legitimacy of the
I think, I mean, the legitimacy is a function of whether the government continues to deliver on its promises, whether people feel represented, whether people feel their questions, their demands are met. So we'll continue to meet the demands of the people. We'll continue to engage with the people, address whatever issues they have, and ultimately legitimacy is a function of whether or not the government continues to do whatever it takes that a legitimate government does, whether it keeps on delivering on its promises. That's the most important issue. So the promises are not just about bread and butter issues, but also rights, freedoms, and all those things. So the government will do everything within its power to make sure that its promises to its people, both political, economic, and social, are fully met. And that's the only way we can continue to ensure our legitimacy.
But one of the big accusations is that it hasn't been keeping its promises. That's why people are protesting. So what's it going to do differently to show people this time it is keeping its promises?
Well, I don't agree with you that the government has been consistently breaking its promises. There are times when, look, you seem to be lumping all the protesters together. Those rejectionist elements in the diaspora are not interested in any improvement whatsoever by the government. They are in the business of denying everything the government has achieved. People have benefited from the wide array of economic and social successes that have been achieved over the last 15, 16 years. And yet you have diaspora elements who just deny flat out that this government hasn't achieved anything. I mean, you have this funny, sometimes absurd argument on the media that our growth is not just 11%, maybe it is something like 8%. 8% growth is something the rest of the world would kill for. But the rejectionist elements, out of their depths, to try to belittle the performance of the government. So we're not particularly worried that people halfway across the world who have always been in the business of rejecting whatever success story there is would find it inconvenient for them to accept that we are restoring our legitimacy or credibility. What matters to us is whether our people feel that their demands are going to be met, and of course we'll make sure that that happens. And that's the only way we can. But internet and all those things, mobile data and everything, they will be restored, that for sure. And that's not going to take forever. believe me. No, don't contact terrorist groups. That's what I can tell you. I wouldn't be surprised if you are having macchiato with a guy who works for Human Rights Watch. That's not what we're talking about. Human Rights Watch didn't create the problem in this country. Theodorus was referring to the role these organizations have in precipitating the crisis. Now, the government has been very consistent, very clear. This has to do with mostly the frustration of the youth at unmet expectations. We either have to manage expectations or we have to continue to do things that will meet the expectations of the youth. But there are rejectionist elements both in the Ethiopian diaspora as well as external groups who are taking advantage of such frustrations and hijacking the process to their own selfish ends. That's what we're talking about. And Human Rights Watch, there is no love lost between this government and Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch is probably the most incorrigible offender as far as putting everything, putting every blame on the government goes. And the Human Rights Watch, they are not only incorrigible offenders, they are also absolute liars. They come up with all kinds of statistics even before their plot is hatched. I mean, the number 400, you remember, last November, Felix Horn or whoever, I mean, the researchers, self-styled researchers from halfway across the world just come up with numbers of victims. And that number doesn't change. So do I worry that this number will all of a sudden grow to 10,000 and 20,000? That's their modus operandi. They make sure violence or anything of the sort in the name of protesters eats away the legitimacy of the government. But fortunately for us, legitimacy is not a function of whether Human Rights Watch extends that legitimacy to you or not, because ultimately legitimacy is a function of whether the government has a good rapport with its own people. So whatever frustrations this government may have caused to the youth, it is determined to address these frustrations, this challenge, and that's how we intend to regain our full legitimacy, which we have not lost anyway. The government will do whatever it takes to restore confidence of investors. So specific measures will have to be taken based on joint assessment made by both investors and the government. That will suffice for me. We'll take whatever measure is necessary to make sure that there is more representation by the opposition, representation of the opposition. So our electoral law will have to be amended in consultation with the opposition, the legal opposition. And whether that will require constitutional amendment, let's cross the bridge when you come to it. But that's not in the works at this point. But we have to make sure that people's voices are fully represented in the parliament. And we'll do what it takes to make sure that that representation is there.
Including accepting the proportional representation system?
Proportional representation, the practice in many countries is that you could use a combination of proportional representation and first past the post. I mean, because ultimately the first past the post arrangement is what they use in many developed democracies. So you don't blame them for not being representative. But what matters is what sort of objectives is meant to achieve. So it could be a combination of one or either of these choices. But that will, we'll be jumping the gun if we are going to give specifics as to what sort of arrangement will follow. But whatever happens has to result in a much better representation of the people in the parliament. We hope and expect our Egyptian brothers to behave in a sane manner wherever they are, whatever they do. And it's our hope and expectation that they do the right things. But simply because we hope they will do the right things doesn't mean they will do the right things. So for us, we are not in the business of obstructing Egyptian efforts to play its responsible role in regional peace and security, if indeed that's the intention. But if they have other intentions, we'll see what we can do. But we're not worried that a contingent that wants to keep peace in South Sudan, if that's the intention, will stand in the way of our progress. But if there is any effort whatsoever by Egyptians or Americans or Lilliputians, for that matter, try to sabotage our success, we'll have to do something about it. But we're not worried that the rest of the world is conspiring against us, because that's not the case. Morocco is an important African country, although it's not part of the African Union. It will create an opportunity to create business ties, investment, and all that. And of course, the visit of the King of Morocco in and of itself is a very important development in further strengthening our bilateral ties. But more importantly, if Morocco, well, it has clearly shown interest in rejoining the AU, and if it hopefully gets the support of the countries of the African Union, members of the African Union, it would rejoin the family of African countries, and that will hopefully go a long way in strengthening the African Union itself. But ultimately, it will depend on whether AU accepts that request. But as far as bilateral relations go, His Majesty's visit here will strengthen our bilateral ties. That's all I can say.
What is the current situation between Eritrea and Ethiopia?
If they in any way cross us by doing something that runs counter to the state of emergency, they will be harshly dealt with. That's what I can say. No war, no peace still is the situation. But they continue to send mercenaries. They continue to train terrorists, and will continue to nip all their efforts in the bud. But our policy is still there. Whatever Eritrea does will be resolutely responded to. So I mean, Omar obviously is what we have in mind is the now or never caucus in the Ethiopian opposition. Obviously, we cannot accommodate the demands and expectations of this now or never caucus, because all they want is like everything to happen now or never. That's not a healthy proposition. So what we are trying to do is to follow the election cycle. This government doesn't have the slightest of intention to all of a sudden change the law and call for a vote based on a changed law. We are here for the long haul. So the opposition should be part of the process. By the way, there are going to be forums where policies will be discussed, short of their membership in parliament. There will be dialogues that will create an opportunity where even the opposition will bring their ideas to bear on policy decisions. Ultimately, what we are going to do is to create a platform where all sorts of voices are going to be heard loud and clear. But if you insist on having a reform now or never, that is what I meant by rejectionist politics from the other side of the Atlantic or from the other side of the Mediterranean. That's all I can say. We don't have to have a position with regard to what South Africa decides with its membership of ICC. I know Burundi has withdrawn. Ethiopia doesn't have to withdraw because we're not members of ICC in the first place. So if our South African comrades decide to withdraw from ICC, we believe that's their entitlement, and we'll respect that decision. Second, we are not, as we speak, withdrawing all our forces, non-AMISOM forces, from all parts of Somalia. By the way, you have to be able to read the map. We have our own sectors. Even AMISOM does have its own sectors. Our forces, they operate within 2 sectors. So this contingent we're talking about has been supporting the movements of even other AMISOM members in many sectors. So it wasn't even intended to be there for as long as it has. So we'll make sure that whenever its services are not needed, it should not be in the business of sticking around there. That's the whole point. But we haven't fully withdrawn our forces, non-AMISOM forces, back to Ethiopia.
On ICC, what I meant to say is this a trend that you support, or what's the view of ICC or in general?
Well, what I can tell you is I don't have. I have neither love nor respect for ICC. I would not be surprised if the rest of Africa shares my opinion. What the government has learned, the most important lesson is that you don't take people for granted. You can extend all the services to the youth, send them to schools, you build them universities, but you have to also create work opportunities sufficiently broad to absorb this new needs, new demands. That's one thing.